Hey everyone, how's it going? It's JDosX here and welcome to Mini Tut Monday episode 10, where today I'm going to show you guys how to do motion tracking in After Effects where there are no visible tracking points in your final scene. This might sound like magic, but we're actually just going to combine together a few neat effects and techniques to do some nifty tricks which actually hide the tracking points. As you can see, I've got the final video which was just playing in the background then. If I go and start to peel these layers off, you'll notice all of a sudden our tracking point friends appear again. So that's what this tutorial is about. If you have not already watched my previous tutorial on doing motion tracking in After Effects, I suggest you go watch it right there, because we're going to be using all the techniques from that in this video, and because I've already done a video on it before, I'm not going to go through it again. Also, before we start, just a word of warning. This particular technique is great for hiding tracking points and other unwanted objects in your scene, but if you're doing solely motion tracking and you actually haven't started recording yet, I actually advise not using this technique and instead trying to use some shape tracking software such as Mocha, which comes with After Effects in later versions. However, this is great to use if you don't have access to Mocha or something has happened in your design workflow which means you have to do it in After Effects. So without further ado, let's get started. The very first thing which you're going to want to do is obviously start a new project up, which I'll do right now. There we go, I'd like to save that. Now, as you can see in here, I've got two videos. These are related to the demo which I just showed you, and these are my two base videos. I'm just going to go ahead and import them, and I'm just going to rename them so it's more obvious what they are. This one is No Tracker, and this one is Tracker. Okay, if I pull these up, you'll notice a key difference between the two. This one, there we go. So this one has got tracking points in it, and this one doesn't. So when you go to do your recording, the very first thing you're going to want to do is to find the medium you're recording against and take a short video of it where you stand as still as you possibly can. Afterwards, you're going to want to put your tracking points on the medium, as you see here I've done with the door, and then you want to record as normal. And what we're going to do basically is we're going to use the video without the tracking points as our mask. We're going to take bits and pieces of this video and we're going to basically tape it over the top of the other one to hide them, and there's some extra smoothing techniques which we can use to make it more seamless. Why would we use a video and not a picture is a good question. The main reason is that when you record a video, there's often some little things such as noise and a little bit of blurring that you won't get in a camera. Also, other things such as exposure and color grading will be different in a video versus a picture, even if you take it from the same recording medium such as a camera phone. Also, so as a result, if you just take a small video and then we can loop it back, it'll create a good effect and it's much more realistic. So without further ado, let's get started on the actual process. The very first thing which we're going to want to do is to take our tracker video, and we're going to create a new composition for it just by dragging it into the new composition button here, and that automatically fills it out. The next thing which we're going to want to do is set up our window for motion tracking just by going Window, Workspace, Motion Tracking. Now, what I'm going to do now is just motion track the two tracking points I've applied there, and I'm going to apply the data to a null object layer, which I'm just creating here by going Layer, New, Null Object, and I'll just call it Tracker. At this point, if you haven't already watched my previous tutorial on doing motion tracking in After Effects, I recommend you go and watch it right now, because I'm just going to do exactly what that video shows. I'm just going to speed through it. So I'm going to do the motion track, I'm going to apply it to my null object layer I just created, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back everyone. So motion tracking is all done. I'm just going to go ahead now and apply that to my null tracking object. Here we go. And as you can see, it's behaving nicely, and this is the first part of the job done. Now the next thing we have to do is get rid of these nasty looking tracking points. So the first thing we're going to want to do is to get our no tracker video, well that's the video which doesn't have the tracking dots in it, and we're going to drag it into a new composition. What we're going to do is we're going to create a very small segment of this video which we will then loop in our main composition. So the first thing which we're going to do is change the length of the composition by going Composition, Composition Settings, and this video runs at 30 frames per second, well 29.97, which translates roughly to 30 frames per second, so I'll just switch that over to 30. I'm going to make this segment 20 frames long, so we just go 0, 0, and then the last segment is 20. Actually, I should explain what all these do. So in the time code text boxes, which you can see here. It goes from frames, which is the far right, to seconds, to minutes, to hours. So this composition is going to have length 20 frames. So what I'm going to do now is go to the first 10 frames, and I'm going to split the layer here by going Edit, Split Layer, and I'm going to delete the excess. So now we have 10 frames of the video, which is roughly steady, and it's just going forwards in time. Now what I'm going to do is, if you loop a video just starting off, then you're going to end up, especially with a video which hasn't been recorded from a camera stand, you'll notice when the video restarts that it will jerk a bit. To fix that, we're going to give it this sort of ping-ponging effect, and the way we're going to do that is by duplicating this layer by just going Control-C, Control-V, and what we'll do now is we'll reverse it. So right-click the layer, go Time, and Time Reverse Layer, and you'll know it's worked when the layer has a red band applied to the bottom of it. Now we're just going to drag it in after the end of the first layer, and that is looking pretty good. So there we go. It's now a nice smooth transition. Alright, so the next thing which we're going to want to do is to render this video out and then re-import it. And what we have to do that is to go Composition, Add to Render Queue. Now the next thing we have to do is go into Output Module, and we have to pick our file format and whatnot. I prefer to export in QuickTime format, and I usually like to, when I hit Format Options, I like to use the H.264 codec with 100% quality and a keyframe every 100 frames or so. We don't need any audio in this case. Now, as I mentioned just a second ago, we're going to render this video out and then we're going to re-import it. There's a real simple way to do that. All we have to do is go up here to Post Render Action and click Import. Now we're just going to save it somewhere. I think we'll just output it straight back into my demo folder. It doesn't really matter where you put this. You can easily delete it later after the entire process is done. So we'll call it No Tracker Loop. There we go, and we'll just render this out and import when it is finished. There we go, so that was nice and quick. So we'll just close that composition back over and we'll go back to our motion tracking composition. So what we're going to do is you'll notice a new file in your assets dialog right here, and in my case it's called notracker_loop because that's the name I gave it when I just rendered it just then. So now what we need to do is we need to get this to loop for the entire duration of our video. So the way we do that is we go right click, Interpret Footage, Main. And this brings up the Interpret Footage dialog, and you can do a whole heap of cool things with it, but in this case the one thing which we need to do is loop it. So we just go down to the very bottom into Other Options and we loop it 999 times. This is significant overkill, but if you can't be bothered to work out how long it's going to take, then 999 is a good start. And now what we can do is we can just drag this into our composition as a new layer. And as you can see, it has stuck itself over the top. And if we play it back, it looks pretty good. Now, we're going to use this layer to hide the tracking dots in this layer. So for the first thing which we're going to want to do is make sure that the door in these two layers line up. So we're just going to expand the properties of this layer, and we're going to go to opacity. Here we go, and I'll just make that about 40% for the moment, so we can see what's going on, and I'll just drag this until it sits nicely over the door. That looks pretty good. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create some masks. We do that just using the mask tool here, with the pen tool, sorry. And basically what this means is we're going to draw a shape over the video, and you can imagine it as a cookie cutter. Whatever is left inside the shape is whatever parts of the video we'll have remaining. So to make it more obvious, I'll just turn the transparency up. So we'll go 0.8. I think, there we go. Nope, sorry, 80. I'm used to working in programming terms, so there we go. So it's now at 80% transparency. I'm just going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to just draw with the no tracker layer selected. I'm going to draw boxes around the tracking points here. All you have to do is to click to drop a point with the tool, and just continue to click around. When you want to close a shape, you just click the original node, and as you can see, the only part of the video that's left is the bit inside the box. But we need to cover 2 points, so all you have to do is draw a second shape. So just keep clicking to drop a node, and then to finish it, click the first node. That's looking pretty good, and what we'll do now is we'll just shrink it down a little bit. It doesn't have to be an exact science. In fact, if it's imperfect, that's probably better, because real life and real life videos are all about imperfection. There we go, that looks pretty good. Okay, so if we turn that back up to 100%, you'll see that we can no longer see our tracking dots, but there are a few glaringly obvious problems with this. The first thing is that the door doesn't have these blatantly obvious stupid looking squares over it, and the next problem is that the squares haven't been tracked to the door, so the tracking points keep coming out to say hello. Well, that's an easy problem to fix. All we have to do is go to our no tracker layer, that's our mask layer. I'll actually just rename that to mask to make it easier to refer to. Now, all we have to do is parent this to our tracker null object, which is this red object here. So all we do is we pick this parent pick whip here, and we just drag it out, and we select the tracker layer. All of a sudden, as we scroll through, you'll notice our mask follows the tracking points nicely, and they're hidden forever. But we still have a few severe problems to deal with, mainly that having these squares here is, if anything, worse than being able to see the tracking points. So there's two things which we need to do. The first thing which we need to do is feather the mask, which basically means blurring the edges so that it flows more seamlessly into the original video. The second thing which we're going to do is a bit of color correction using the curves effect. So to feather these masks, we just go into our mask layer here, click the drop down arrow, and go to masks. If you want to affect more than one thing with the same property simultaneously, all you have to do is hold shift and click them so that they're both selected. You'll notice that now when I press one of the drop down arrows that they both expand their properties. If I go over here and start to feather them, you'll notice that both of their feather properties are being changed at the same time. So I think 15 pixels will be enough. Now if we deselect, we'll notice that we've got a nice smooth blurring effect going on. See, we might want to do a little bit more than that actually. Maybe try 25. This is all just about trial and error to see what looks good. So it's already looking a lot better, but not even close to what we need. So the first thing which we're going to do is we're going to turn this back from a motion tracking workspace into a standard workspace by going Window, Workspace, Standard. And this gives back all the access to our previous dialogues much more easily. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do some color correction to blend this into the original door. Now, as I said originally, the reason why we took a short video to create our mask layer was because it would reduce all of these problems that was involved, and one of them would be color correction. Sometimes, as you can see here, you'll still need to do some color correction, but if you were to take a single picture instead of a video, it would be a lot worse, and I know because I've tried it, and it was terrible. So we're just going to go into Effects/Presets, and we're just going to search for curves. And we're going to go to color correction curves, and we're going to drag this over the mask layer. Now this brings up this little nifty graph here, and we have options to change all our different color channels, red, green, blue, alpha, or all at the same time. This is all just about fiddling. The first thing which I notice is that our actual video is a lot darker than the mask, so we can probably just start by tweaking that a slight amount, and this really is just about pretty much trial and error and using your spidey senses. I also noticed that in this case the background video is actually a lot bluer, so I'll go into the blue channel and I'll see if I can fiddle with it to make it look a bit more natural. Actually, what we might do is remove some of the red. There we go. So working with curves color correction is as much about knowing which colors to add as knowing which colors to take away, and it does take a lot of fiddling, which is why I said at the beginning of the video, if you have another method to do tracking, especially shape tracking software, you should probably avoid this. But in many cases you'll end up in a situation where you've already started work and there's no way you want to start again, so this is a good alternative. So not only is our background layer more blue, but it's also less red, if that makes sense. So all I can do is I can go to the red channel, which I've selected the red channel here, and I can just go and pull the graph and start to reduce the red, and as you can see, it's pulled it down until it's pretty much looking perfect. There we go. So the squares are practically hidden now. There's just a slight hint of too much green. So we'll just go into the green channel and we'll see if we can remove a little bit of green. There we go. I think that's good. Now I think the overall luminance is a bit too dark, so we'll go into RGB and we'll just try and bring that naturally looking. And there we go. It's completely hidden. Now if we play back our original video, you'll see that the tracking points are completely gone and all is well now. So the last thing which we're just going to do is whack that text over the top, and all we're going to have to do to create that is just create a text layer and put in whatever you want. That is obviously way too large. If anyone wants to know which font this is a free font called SD Grunge Serifia. I'll put a link for that in the description below, and it's a free font. Let's see, I'll just turn that down a little bit. There are a few more video effects which we now have to do though to make the title text fit in. The main one of that is that if you take a look at a video, you'll always notice it to be a little blurry, whereas any assets which we drop in will be pretty much looking perfectly crisp. So the way to fix that is the first thing we have to do is of course just parent the text onto the tracker, so we'll just do that now using the pick whip, and now everything follows nicely. Yep, there we go. The last thing which we're going to want to do though is just apply slight blur to the text. So all we have to do is go back into effects and presets and search Gaussian. There we go, and we'll just drop a nice little Gaussian blur onto the text there, and we'll make it maybe about 1.5 pixels. There we go. And the other thing you'll notice is this is quite black, and in real life you have different shades of black. So we'll just go back into character mode and we'll just color correct it a little bit, so I'll make it a nice sort of dark grey instead. And that is pretty much it. If you're feeling adventurous, you can also fiddle with the layer mode switches, and that does things such as just changes the way the colors on this layer are added to the colors of the layer behind it. So for example, if you're going to try and create a realistic paint effect by painting over a real life object, you'd probably use something such as add or subtract. And what add or subtract does is basically it adds the RGB color values of the above layer to the RGB color values of the layer below it. So for example, if you have a gray, if this text was completely gray, it would have an RGB value of 128, 128, 128. That means that if you were to put the add layer on, if you were to set this layer mode to add, it would add 128 to each channel in the layer below it. To demonstrate what I mean, I'll just select it now. So if we go into add, because it's fairly dark, it doesn't add much color, but if we make it lighter, it just keeps getting brighter. There we go. So that's it from me today. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope this has helped your VFX projects.